Did he say that he's Didn't he say that
We're
he's
live.
captionable?
We're live, Taylor.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay. Well, for all you folks out there, you can see that Paul isn't currently with us, but he's managed to boot the show in. We're not sure if Russ will be with us tonight, and basically our cameras are off to try and make sure that the frequency remains, workable. So Paul is trying to sort out some tech gremlins at his end. So we'll just start off as it is. And so what I'm going to start with here is something that I've just been looking at. So we'll try and contribute on the chat. I'm just on my mobile at the moment, so I'll try and swing over to the chat as well. But looking up, Paul's back good. You there, Paul?
Can anybody in the chat room hear me?
Yeah,
I'm sure they can now. You're with us. I just tried to, obviously, you booted the show. Yo, Paul, yeah. Can you hear me? Hello, Paul.
I don't think Paul hears us.
Paul, just confirm if you can hear. Right, so what I'll do then, he's there, but he's not there. So I'll just carry on, and hopefully he'll come back in.
I don't.
You can still hear me though, right?
I can hear you now, Alex.
Right, okay, Paul. Right, let's have a bit of faith and get this show on the road. I just explained, mate, that there've been some tech gremlins. I've had a few chats in the chat, and I was gonna start it off with a few thoughts and move it away a little bit from what we talked about last week, because we'll come back to it no doubt at some point, but other things have been going on. And something that I noticed, because my mum came from Belgium, I noticed a few days ago that Belgium has recognised Palestine as a state, and apparently our beloved leader, Herkia, has now followed suit. So it does look as if there is this movement amongst the traditionally left-leaning states, and including those WEF types where Klaus Schwab has installed their young leaders. It looks as if that leftist, communistic infiltration of all the quangos and the left-leaning nation states, that is like kind of a countervailing movement to Trump in the US, and the battle lines are drawn. But obviously, this declaration of the Palestinian state is very interesting, and it made me think again about, certain of the historical facts. There's arguments on both sides, but what I thought was really interesting, is theologically resonant as well, is that it was the Roman Empire that basically declared Palestine as a state in 135 CE to displace Israel as a nation. So Israel had this historical continuity for all those centuries. And a lot of people on the left conveniently forget that fact. And they just sort of blot it out of history. They move straight to 1948, and then people are debating about 1948. But it was the Romans in 135 CE. Now, that was Emperor Hadrian, and it was the Ben Bar revolution that he put down very severely, and as a punishment, renamed Israel as Syria Palestina. So Palestine only came into existence with that name because of a Roman attempt to obliterate Israel for their rebellion. Now, if you think about that, 135 CE is probably about 40 years after the Apostle John, the only apostle that wasn't killed and died of old age. He had the revelation on Patmos in about 95 CE. So about 40 years later, you've got this situation that happens with Hadrian. And obviously, if you look at Revelation 12, a lot of people who are not biblically literate won't know this, but Revelation 12, before Revelation 13, obviously, talks about this historical battle of this dragon, which we understand ultimately is a fully fledged expression of the serpent which becomes Satan full blown, has always chased the woman and her offspring. So it's not just Jesus, it's Israel. It's the female, the feminine, is this covenant partner to God. So God becomes the masculine, and then the nation of Israel becomes the woman, who's essentially the woman in Revelation 12. But you could also see it was the Virgin Mary giving birth to Jesus, trying to sweep away, dragon tries to sweep away the woman and her child, but the ground opens up and protects them. So there's this like divine protection. Then Revelation 13, chapter later, you get the beast, and you end up with the two beasts, and a beast that was and is not and is to come up out of the abyss. And if all the nations come at the end and surround Israel, it does look like these lines are divided between America's support for Israel and all these other nations that have split with America because they're supporting the leftist agenda still, and Trump's taking a different angle. So it looks as if all these other nations could come together, and potentially by supporting a Palestinian state, you could argue that that's a recapitulation of the Roman Empire beast that John spoke about in 95 CE, which 40 years later, you've got this sort of renaming of Israel as Palestine as an attempt by the dragon to vanquish the woman by vanquishing the name. And then, of course, you look at what's happening now. All these nations that might surround Israel are now recognizing Palestine, which the Romans did as Syria, Palestina. And a lot of these nations are European nations that came out of the Roman Empire. This could be a recapitulation of the beast that was and is not and is to come up out of the abyss. So I thought that was quite an interesting connection. I don't know what you think about that, Paul. If you're still live with us.
Uh-oh.
Well,
It's
that's
still
what I mean. You can't hear me, can you?
Yeah. You're coming through now. There's a bit of a lag. Yeah, there's a bit of a lag.
Well,
Just give us your just give us a feedback. Yeah, give us an opinion on what I just said, Paul, if you heard me.
Fuck, man. It looks like his thing is just really not working too well.
Yeah, could be lag.
Maybe.
Oh well. He's disappeared. And he may be back.
I mean, to be fair, we can carry if he's not able to do much. So
yeah, absolutely. So I'm seeing some other comments coming up in the chat. He's just apologized 5 minutes ago for the tech issues. So hopefully he'll come back online. But yeah, so obviously I've just made that sort of case there, and it's a theological case, Taylor. And obviously I know that that's not your primary approach. But I wanted to sort of kick the show off in light of what's happened with this idea of this split geopolitically. So even if you take the theological and spiritual stuff out of it, which for me is a typological analysis of what was happening back then, the biblical account of Revelation, what might be happening now, it does seem as if there's a polarization between these more left-leaning World Economic Forum, young leaders, inspired by Schwab, UN, NATO, all these traditional forces over against the states. And of course, it's putting Trump in a bit more of a delicate position on the world stage, because he has to not just fight his internal enemies who are trying everything, but he has to manage all these external expectations as well about all these other countries that are putting pressure on, and obviously now trying to recognize Palestine. And it looks like there could be this conflagration in the sort of Near East and Middle East.
Well, let me just say this. Well, in case Webby is still not able to say anything, he's back, by the way. But let me just say, first of all, to Wolf in the chat, I don't usually do the theological stuff, just because I leave that to you and Webby to do. So I'm going to speak about this from a historical and a political standpoint.
Mm.
And that's more of the fact that the current state of Israel is nothing to do with the original state of Israel, because when the Rothschilds funded the creation of Israel in 1948, going back to 1917 with the Balfour Declaration, it wasn't even originally going to be called Israel. They were going to call it, I believe it was going to be called the Land of Zion or something like that. Okay, short for Zionism, because of Theodore Herzl and with the first Zionist conference. But they changed it to the name Israel in order to get the Christians on board, because they knew that if they didn't have the Christian support, they wouldn't be able to establish a foothold in Palestine. They needed international support. And at the time, the Western countries were still very Christian-centered and still very theologically and spiritually sound. So that's why they chose that name. But and the reason why they chose that spot in the world for the current state of Israel, one of the reasons is not even having to do with anything theological or spiritual, but just the fact that it's basically the center of the world in terms of everything. It's basically right in the center of everything, and if you want a one world government, that's pretty much the place that you want it to be at, in the center of the world. Because if you look on a map, that's pretty much where it is. And of course, there's also the fact that Israel itself is, obviously going by they also wanted to appeal to the spiritual significance of the idea of the Bible and etc. So there's also that. So it's a multifaceted thing, but it has nothing really to do with the spiritual and ancient version of Israel from the Bible. This is more of a Rothschild created state that masks itself in hypocrisy in order to get the Christian Zionists on board, thanks to the help of the Schofield Reference Bible and such. So, and by the way, I just want to mention this real quick, being that if it wasn't for the death of Franklin Roosevelt in 1945, the very strange and sudden death of him, there would have been no state of Israel in 1948. Because as much as Roosevelt, FDR, was a POS, an evil, satanic, disgusting bastard, probably the most evil, worst person ever to sit in the White House, and his administration was full of communists, at the end of the day, he was one of the globalist / Marxist faction, like people like Bernard Baruch and Dwight Eisenhower and George Soros, these kind of people. And this goes into the whole thing about the globalists and the Zionists being against each other in a lot of respects. They do overlap in certain respects, but they also go against each other in a lot as well. For example, George Soros and Netanyahu have always hated each other because the globalists hate Israel as a country because it gets in the way of creating their one world order, because it creates so much chaos over there in the Middle East. They can't get the Arab states on board because Israel keeps creating crap over there. Back in 1995 or 96, 97, something like that, under Bill Clinton, Rabin, or whatever his name is, the prime minister of Israel, he wanted to. He made a deal with Egypt in order to recognize the Palestinian state because he was a globalist and Bill Clinton was the overseer of that. So what happens to him? He gets assassinated by a Zionist Likud type, and the prime minister of Egypt, he also dies suddenly as well. And then Bill Clinton, he gets the Monica Lewinsky scandal. So this has been a battle that's gone on for a long time. But I digress, though. The broader point is that the current state of Israel doesn't have anything to do with the biblical version of it, nor is it even liked by all globalists because of just the crap that it accomplishes. The Zionists, they want a one world government, but they want it in Israel. They want the Greater Israel Project, your Netanyahu types, your Likud types, etc. While the globalists, like Zbigniew Brzezinski and George Soros, they just want a one world government, probably in the United States. So it's like a fight between two crime families, if that makes sense, like the mafia.
Yeah, so what would you say then, if you just assess things in geopolitical terms? Obviously, 2,500 years ago, Israel was a significant, because it was connected, Fertile Crescent, it was a trade route. So although Israel was at times a reasonably powerful small nation compared to a lot of the bigger nations like, you know, the Assyrians and the Egyptians. It was stuck at a confluence, really. So it's very strategically significant for trade.
Yep.
But obviously in the modern world, it isn't. So it's become something that's relatively minor. Then it's being used as a political pawn, which it was at the time. And a lot of the theological narratives that came back from God were all about, well, you need to trust in God, you need to trust in me, not these powers. So that's like an enduring theological theme that was in place. And the difference now is, you know, ultimately, the only power that Israel relies on is the state, because nobody else is supporting him. So the point is now everyone else is falling like dominoes. Keir Starmer's just come out in support, declared, you know, a Palestinian state. Belgium did it a couple of days ago. So a lot of these other kind of traditional European states are now supporting a Palestinian state, which is not going to end well for whatever form of Jewishness we think still is trying to survive in the world, whether we think it's legitimate or not. You know, whether we think they're Ashkenazi Jews or whatever type of Sephardic Jew, you know, whatever, if they've got a legitimate land claim, there's a lot of stuff going down that's going to become very problematic in the area around, not just Israel's legitimate claims, but Islamic claims, because it doesn't just touch on the geopolitical, it touches on several religious claims where, you know, Judaism is relatively small compared to Christianity and Islam. And of course, Christianity does not have those ethnic connections anymore, whereas Islam has much more powerful regional affiliations to, you know, the geography. So it looks like this has become an Islamic cause, and the Islamic cause, and now, you know, in this country, we're looking at having a law passed in terms of Islamophobia. There's something called Bible Gateway, which is a very prominent app on your phones in the West, where people who say go to Bible studies don't want to take the Bible. They can go to Bible Gateway and they can check any Bible verse. But it's been blocked because of Keir Starmer's Online Safety Act in this country. You can now not access Bible Gateway. And it's because of online protections against harms. And what are the harms in this case? Offending Muslims. So that's all gone down. So there's a big issue here beyond just the traditional geopolitical wranglings. There's this sort of Islamic collaboration with a lot of these communistic left-leaning. Who are the useful idiots here? Is Islam being used by the politicos, or is Islam trying to use the politicos to leverage, and will they eventually fall out?
Well, let me directly answer with the current situation with Israel and in the Middle East. So I've brought this up before about the Q operation and how the final solution to this issue is most likely. I don't have the script, so I can't say for certain, but it's most likely, and that's where that's where the evidence is heading towards, is a prominently Arab full Palestinian state with a Jewish minority, with Israel either being abolished as a state, or it will become filled with a Palestinian majority. Because at this point, unfortunately speaking, unlike in the 1940s, there's not really much that can be done at this point when it comes to relocating the Jews at this point, because that's unfortunately that ship's already sailed. So the only thing that really can be done by this point is just make peace in the region, and not only acknowledge Palestine as a state, but also be able to obviously getting the Zionist power out. Obviously, that's another one, and that's pretty much the only thing that really can be done with that section of the world, because at this point there's not really any other place to put the Jews, because unlike before, the world is pretty much filled. There's nowhere really to dump them, if that makes sense. Nor should we really have to at this point. But anyway, moving on to the geopolitical situation regarding the Middle East, with the UK and Belgium and etc. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
could. Just before you move on, Taylor, before 1948, what you're talking about, Israeli Jews and Arabs lived perfectly peaceful in harmony. They were colleagues of each other. They had teas. They had, they lived peacefully until these Zionists got involved. So that 1948, Taylor, where prophecy is being fulfilled, but it's being fulfilled for a reason. We certainly don't see we certainly don't see Zionists going on with Palestinians like we used to see Jews going on with them. And that's where we get the Ashkenazis in, because we didn't have this issue in that region until these people got in there. So
it's not quite that simple. There's a little bit more to it than that. To counter what you said, sorry to cut you off, but I just want to correct you, and that's there was basically no Jews in Palestine up until after World War I. It was less than 1% of the Palestinian population. After World War I.
Hang on. What are we saying are Jews then? Are you saying there was no Jewish people living in that area until?
Yes. Basically none. It was like a few thousand. Maybe like a few thousand.
I disagree with it, because the Jews that you're talking about that came to that area were all European. So that means they're not Semitic. Yet we already had Semitic Jews in that. They've always been there, Taylor. So you can't say that we didn't have this, because that's not true. That's not true.
I'm just saying that the after the Ottoman Empire, after the Austro-Hungarian Empire fell, and Palestine was put under the British Mandate, as it was known back then. That's when they were starting to allow the Jews to immigrate to Palestine slowly, while keeping a lot of.
This is the problem. This is the problem, though. We're going to argue about the term Jew. We've got Semitic Jews already in that area. They already lived together. But you're talking about us now bringing Jews. These aren't Jews. These are the state. This is the political state that's being formed. So I can see where you're going, but there's a definite differentiation there.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know what I mean at the end of the day. The point is
yes.
that...
Yeah, but that's what I mean. This show is about... We know what people mean when they come on, but we've got to start to break.
Oh, you're cutting out again, damn it.
I'm a Catholic. Well, we've got to differentiate what Christianity actually means. And it does the same with Judaism. The Jews that... Yeah. The Jews that Savior, they're looking for a Messiah, but they don't believe that Jesus was that Messiah. Then we get a load of imported Jews in speech marks that are just there for a good ride and a free whatever it is, because that's what happened with that area. When you speak to people whose generations have had Palestinian and Jewish working together, living together, up until a certain era, and that's when the Western has influenced.
Yeah,
and we've got to look at 1948 as being a fledgling thing where Israel is there; it's on the map. So all of a sudden, everything is Bible related, and that isn't true. That's not true. We have got the Israel being fermented. We have got Israel saying this is where the Jews are, and we've got Jerusalem coming up. But that's not what this particular thing was about. And I think that's where the battle is now. The battle is the original Judaism and the false Judaism that's being meshed into it. And then you've got Christianity that's on top of that. And the Jews don't believe in Jesus. It's particularly the fundamentalist Torah Jews, Talmudic Jews, and they're the ones that fall into line with all these European Jews that come over. I mean, if we start talking about Germany and the Transfer Act, we're going back to the earliest 1933, where they were going to take all the Jews' money, all the wealth, put it into bank accounts, send them all to Madagascar. That was one of the
Madagascar plan,
original destinations, and then they could actually German needs. So you can see how that has fermented terror. I'm certainly not calling you out on it. I think you're spot on with parts of all of that, but we've got to get to this fundamentalism where these Jews in speech marks were seeded. They were put in the 6-day war to do all this stuff. It's all about a calculation of that area, and it's an area that's been sought after since day one. So I see a lot of the biblical stuff is not what we're arguing about. It's got nothing to do with the Bible, what we argue about. It's to do with man and greed and religion. And I think that's what we need to start to sort out.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, this whole thing regarding that area of the world is pretty much, at least for the last 100 years, probably more, has been very geopolitical, as because just again that part of the world, just like I was explaining to Alex, that part of the world is like it's basically the center of the world at that point. If you want a world government, which is what they want it to be right there. Of course, that's where all the trade, a lot of trade routes go through there as well historically. So there, it is a big deal, even if it has nothing to do with the Bible itself, and they only use it as a smokescreen to get Christian support. At the end of the day, it's still part of it. But I shall, going back to what I was saying before, though, about what Alex said, is that right now when you have the Q plan, which has control over the left, including these politicians, whether they're real or not. And so in recent years, in the last couple of years, I'd say probably mainly since this Gaza thing, this Wag the Gaza thing started, you've had more of the left coming out and in support, and coming out of nowhere, seemingly in support of the Palestinians and the people in Gaza, etc. When, as we know, for decades up until this point, the left was 100% against that, because they were in bed with the globalists, the Zionists, etc. They would never support they would never be against Israel, because the entire establishment, which is the leftist establishment and the fake right establishment at the time, was completely on board with Greater Israel. It was 99% approval over here in the United States, and it was similar over in Europe. But the point is, at this point, is right now the game plan clearly is getting the left on board with the idea of recognizing a Palestinian state, to get all of these lefties on board, all of these liberals and these communists, etc., getting them on board with that idea. Meanwhile, Trump still sits there and pretends just as he has all along, pretends to be pro-Israel, pro-Netanyahu, so that when the rug gets pulled out from under him, that will be a full unification of both sides of the political aisle, and even in the center, against the state of Israel, or I should call the fake state of Israel. So that's currently what the plan is. And you can tell that just by looking at how the world stage is moving toward that direction. So, and the same thing happened with people like Candace Owens, Charlie Kirk, etc. When they all came on the scene around the time Trump came down that escalator ride, they all came out initially as being supposedly pro-Israel. Charlie Kirk was pretty much, from what I remember, one of the biggest supporters of Israel. But then in recent years, he came out. He seemingly was becoming anti-Israel, saying that we shouldn't have a war in Iran for Israel. He turned down a sponsorship deal with from Netanyahu, etc. And now we have this. We have this story in the media, even in the mainstream to an extent, running around saying that Netanyahu and Israel were behind the Charlie Kirk assassination. Now, whether you believe the assassination is real or not is irrelevant in this case, because at the end of the day, the narrative deployment of this story, which really, if this was a normal media that we were dealing with, would never have happened. So you have Netanyahu coming out on air saying, well, fake Netanyahu rather, coming out saying, comparing this quote unquote allegations to the stuff from the Middle Ages, like poisoning, like Jews poisoning the wells and causing the Black Death, the blood libel, etc., etc. He's bringing up stuff that pretty much 99% of the public has never even heard of. Why is he doing that? Well, it's because it's to get the idea in people's heads, even if they ridicule it. And it's the same thing with this. I'm blaming Israel for Charlie Kirk's assassination. The mainstream media of the past, if they weren't under control, obviously you and I both know they never would have even entertained this idea. Because the moment that you bring out an idea like this, everyone even if you entertain it, even if you ridicule it, you're putting it in people's heads. And as we know in the past, what the media used to do when they when a movement was starting against their agenda, their first tactic was to ignore it and just pretend it didn't exist. And only after it became big enough that where they couldn't ignore it, then they would address it and ridicule it. This was just a few days after the Charlie Kirk assassination event. So the point I'm bringing up here is that this whole thing is being said against Israel, against the state of Israel. Meanwhile, we have Trump still seemingly supporting them, which as we know is fake. That's been fake from day one. But the point is that now we have both the left, the right, and the center all are being against the state of Israel, which is what we want, because ultimately at the end of the day, we want this head of the snake to be optically destroyed and bring an end to the Zionist power grab. Even and this is not to say that all Jews are bad. Wolf, a couple people in the chat have mentioned this. Obviously, not all Jews are bad. A lot of Jews are good, and they're anti-Zionist, anti-Netanyahu. Even as we speak, there are plenty of protests in Israel against Netanyahu. So this whole thing is it's going about as exactly as I suspected. Obviously, the twists and turns, like the Charlie Kirk event, is obviously something you wouldn't see coming. But the overall flow, but the overall endpoint that we're heading towards just never seems to change. And it really does show that we're heading towards what we want, which is the abolition of the Zionist power, as well as the globalist power. So that's my comment on that.
You still there, Paul?
Yeah. Have you got something to add to that, mate?
Well, what we've got here is we've got classically different lines of analysis. The point is, for me, I look at it and I think, regardless of what's being used, as a sock puppet for some other agenda, the world, the nations, are unifying together against the state of Israel, which, no matter its legitimacy, because we read about a harlot as well, whether you apply it to the church or a harlot Israel, it played the harlot by not trusting God and relying on these other powers. So from a kind of a historical, spiritual perspective, a bunch of nations across the world all unifying against Israel, whether we call it a Rothschild Zionist project or not, is the whole world coming against Israel, which is still situated in what we consider to be the Holy Land, which is not just geopolitically significant, it's religiously significant, with 3 different religious traditions all making different claims about its significance, particularly the axis between Jews and Muslims because of the ethnic and geographical proximity. Christians have spread out much more across the world. So, yeah, as Taylor said, Christians may have been recruited sneakily and manipulatively to support the project in 1948, whether false or whatever, it doesn't really matter. The reality is, externally, we've got the conditions in place whereby all the nations come together against Israel, no matter what you think about the legitimacy of Israel. The template, you can see all these fault lines coming together for a kind of an Armageddon type scenario. Now, how that pans out, obviously you've got rich symbolic visual imagery that's very dramatic in the book of Revelation and other places in prophecy, in the biblical texts. But clearly, when you strip that away, you know, we've got some sort of conflagration around that region where the whole world is led to come together against this force. So I think just archetypally and so on, it certainly looks like those fault lines are coming together so that it does resemble a fulfillment of prophecy.
Well, the thing is that, you know, Hitler stated this in 1924-25 when he wrote Mein Kampf, and when he was in prison. He wrote that that these scoundrels, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, that these scoundrels do not want a state to call their own. All they want is a central hub for their criminals and their scoundrels. That's obviously paraphrasing. Essentially, what he's saying is that even back in 1924-25, this is well before the state of Israel came into being, he knew where this was going. He knew exactly what the Zionists were trying to do. They didn't want a Jewish state. All they wanted was just a central hub for criminals and scoundrels and anyone to run to if they wanted to escape persecution, a place with its own laws and rules. So, and that's exactly what it ended up being. The state of Israel has ended up being a state for countless. There's over the decades, there's been so many countless criminals, rapists, terrorists, etc., who have fled to Israel in order to escape justice and persecution from, like, the United States or in Europe. So Hitler nailed it right on the head, as always. So he knew exactly where this was going. And the world turning against this this criminal central hub, I don't even consider it really a country or state. I just consider it just a central hub for criminals, which is, again, like what Hitler said. And the fact that everyone's turning against it is exactly what we want, because the Zionist power, which has been centered in Israel all this time since 1948, has been behind so many of the world's problems. Whether you're talking about the 6-Day War, 9/11, the Kennedy assassination, almost always there was a Zionist element to it, even if they weren't even if they weren't always the main cause. So at the end of the day,
and it's how that's got into those places of power, Taylor. It hasn't just appeared there. This has happened over centuries. This has been a massive plan. This has really been a big plan to get hold of that area of Jerusalem. Jerusalem was always the key here. This is why we've got to fall away from what people think other men are doing for other people. There's a spiritual agenda here, and we've got to be aware of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Wolf says in the chat, you can come out with some really sound comments, and obviously done quite a lot of research. And the comment there, don't know if you can highlight it, Webby. Islam is not an Arab faith. There are more non-Arab Muslims than Arab. And the point about that is, yes, of course, Islam is now spread out like Christianity did into, as we know, Pakistan and maybe several other areas. So they may not typically have the kinship ethnically, but because Islam is highly ideological, I mean, Christianity can be, but Islam is highly ideologically driven. That's what makes it such a suitable vehicle to try and colonize it. So essentially, we've got this situation now where, you know, you can imagine Pakistani Muslims being anti-Israel just because they're Muslim, not because they've got an Arab connection with, you know, the area. So it carries the ideological seeds.
Absolutely. The Muslims that I know don't know many Jews. They really don't. But the Muslims I know are westernized Muslims that say, well, we don't accept those bits of the Quran and those hadiths because they're traditional, they're cultural. Well, we have been accepting in floods real Islam, fundamental Islam, and those are getting places, they're getting footholds in this country. So my Muslim friends will end up in a position where they've got to choose. Now, again, our Muslim friends, Alex, know that there's some good points in Sharia law because they're very much based on Christian, and I put Christian in speech marks, but they're very based on Christian laws. Now, if you accept the good things of that and not the rest, all of a sudden you are not a Muslim. Because if I accept things what I like out of my scriptures as a Christian, and then not the others, then I'm not a Christian either. So we are being pulled to a fulcrum. We're being pulled to a focus point where we are going to have to talk about this. Because, you know, again, people I know very well who are my Muslim friends really, really don't think that a 54-year-old man should be having sex with a 9-year-old girl. That's a different culture. That's a different tradition. But is that the best example that they've got? Yes, as long as he's not shagging kids. So if we've got to put that into a perspective, then if that was my so-called religion that I was indoctrinated into, then I've got, oh, there's something not right about this. Now, Catholicism and Church of England, very, very, very much the same. They don't necessarily agree that we should be having sex with children. They don't promote it. It's not in our scriptures to point at. And we don't have prophets or anybody like that who's, you know, who's got an authority or a scholar who says that's what we should do. Now, before I knew what religions were, these man-made constructs that control things, I thought, well, that's not a good thing to do. I don't think that's, we shouldn't do that. So when I look at the Bible and it says, yeah, do you know what? I agree. These are God's words. So God agrees I shouldn't be shagging kids. Well, that's a good start. Now, let me read more of this Bible, because it's not anything to do with what people have done, what men have done, what men are trying to propagandize or do things with. And it's when we get down to the conversations with people, real men, real women, they don't believe in this. Well, the problem that we now have is that if fundamental, and I use the term fundamental because Islam to its fundamentalism is a state of governance. It's not a religion. It's a you do it all type thing. So if we get to that and the footholds are there, then everybody now get, well, Alex, you're a Christian, so you're a dhimmi, you're a knobhead. So are you going to pay your jizya? Are you going to pay your tax so you can go and worship your made-up God? Or are you going to convert? So if you don't convert, you pay your tax. If you don't pay your tax, you're dead. Now, is that fundamentalism? Is that religion? Or is that a relationship with a God? And
I've got an interest.
I don't believe so, because the relationship with the God that I know says it's not good, that.
Right. why don't we just, right, let's take the Islam thing out of it, because I think you make some good points, and let's just break the logic down, right? Because I think this is what people often don't see. They get lost in the details. Having a roast on a Sunday isn't anyone's religion officially. So it's got nothing to do with Islam, Christianity, anything else. But having a roast on a Sunday is nobody's religion. But I think we can all agree that somebody could turn around tomorrow and decide, if they had enough power, that having a roast on a Sunday is become a new religion. So you could instate the new religion of having a roast on a Sunday, and you could take over the whole world, and you could impose on everybody who didn't have a roast on Sunday the death penalty. Now, if you're in a rational society where free speech was possible, you would have people being able to contest the basis of that claim that having a roast on Sunday was the essence of all truth and reality upon which your life must be built. So you've been having a chat in the chat. There's been sort of little distinction about, and on this rock I shall build my church, and the gates of hell shall not be, prevail against it. And is it a literal Peter? Well, actually, probably it's the characteristics of Peter or whatever. But Jesus himself described his own words as a rock. But of course, what we take from that is there is a foundation upon which men and women and communities will build their lives. And that has to be fit for purpose according to Jesus. So when the storms come, and the gales and the challenges and tests come, it doesn't fall apart. So coming back to our roast on a Sunday religion that gets imposed, that is not going to pass the test when certain things happen in life and somebody says, hey, did you have your roast on a Sunday? Yeah. Well, how did that contribute to you, moving forward with this particular crisis that's erupted? Well, I don't know. All I know is this person said that this is the ultimate truth, have a roast on a Sunday, and you don't have to worry about anything else. But people can't then apply it to broader issues of life. It's just having a roast on a Sunday. Just because somebody imposed it ideologically doesn't make it relevant. This is why we need to think theologically. We need to say, what are the underpinnings of any claim? Why would a holy land historically be significant other than because a bunch of people said it was, like a roast dinner on a Sunday? So we've got to get to the metaphysics behind it, the underlying reality structure underneath it, the claims about that structure. Philosophers have debated this, never mind religious and theological types. All types of people have debated the underlying structure, philosophers par excellence. What is the metaphysical foundation? Well, with religions, they claim to reveal what that is. Now, you can reject religions, but if you're going to reject religions, what are you replacing it with? What's your underlying substructure that unifies the whole of reality in such a way that your life becomes meaningful? Because if you don't do that in the modern world, you've got a really great life.
I'm just saying that's what we replace it with. There's a debate going on in the chat room what the rock is, right? It's not Peter. Peter is not the rock. Peter is not the church. Peter is not the Pope. It's the revelation Peter had. You're the Son of the true living God. On that rock, I'll build my church. Peter.
Exactly. And that's why all these things are shadows, aren't they? Really, when you think about it, the geopolitical maneuverings are the silhouettes that we see cast. So we can look at that, projected onto a wall. We can see the outline figures and say, hey, look at that drama taking place in silhouette. But what's going on at a deeper level? And on what basis are people making their decisions when they're spectators and voyeurs of this? Are they just seeing it as entertainment, like we were saying last week about Charlie Kirk? Is it just voyeurism? Is it everyone just having an opinion and piling on? When will it come back to people taking their own independent critical stance and ask questions? What's the ultimate nature of reality? And what's my relationship to that? Because it's definitely not a roast dinner on a Sunday.
Have you guys actually read about Sharia law? Usury is prohibited under Sharia law. Why do you think Zionist bankers put out propaganda against Islam? Look, the Muslims I know, they help out each other and they lend money for what it is. But those Muslim friends of mine would do that to me also. But the religion tells them not to do that. Now, the Jews will, you will find that a Jewish father would bankrupt his own son. He would bankrupt his own son if it was just business. Because I've seen it done, and then they said, look, that's just business. I hope you come in for dinner on Sunday. You've just bankrupted your own son. You've destituted him. He's got nothing. But please come round for dinner on Sunday, because that's just business. Now, that is a religion. That's not a relationship with a God who says that's not what we should do. We shouldn't do usury. We shouldn't charge interest on payments we're not lending, let alone payments on what we are lending. If I gluten-free beans on toast with a bit of cheese on, just how you want it, you'll go, thank you for that. And then I'll go, oh, I've not had chips and gravy for ages. Do you know what, Paul? I'll get you chips and gravy. That is what we're talking about. But when we're talking about usury, I'm not getting you chips and gravy. Yeah, I'm not getting chips and gravy, but I'm getting you your stuff. And then you want more stuff, so I'll get you some more stuff. But I'm still not getting the chips and gravy. But you haven't lent me anything. You've got no dog in this fight. So when we talk about usury, when we talk about lending money against nothing, yeah, God says, no, that's not how it is. Because when you become bankrupt and destitute, in the old days, after 7 years, you've lost your house, you've lost your land, you've lost everything. After 7 years, we go, there you go, mate, have it all back and try again. That's how it was meant to work, because we can't carry on with debt. We have to forgive it. And these what were jubilees were, but we're taken away from everything that was in the Bible. Why? Because it takes us away from having something that is divine, something that could actually work. When we start to work on what man has made, that's where it all falls to pieces, because man can't make anything that works in this world, because anything that works has got to be with God. And when we decide to not be with God, no matter how silly it seems, you know, oh, I want to do that. But God says, don't do that. Yeah, but I want to. Well, God will say, okay, go and do it. I love you, but you can't be with me. And then we turn around and blame God for not being with. This is where we're getting down to.
Yeah.
Did I get it? Did anybody hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody did.
Hello?
Paul? You still there, mate?
Damn, Paul.
Well, I don't know. The tech issue in this end.
Well, that's while that is messing around, the tech. I do have a couple of stories that I do want to get to today. Because
Can anybody hear?
Yeah.
You're cutting in and out really bad.
I mean, ultimately, what I would say, though, Paul, is in the chat, there's been a lot of stuff where the Wolf has spoken about Sharia and usury. And you mentioned, Paul, that in practice, a lot of Jewish business-minded people, they'll bankrupt their own son. But in Exodus 22:25, if you lend money to any of my people who is poor among you, you shall not be like a moneylender to him. You shall not charge him interest. So, and it's also in Leviticus 25:35, if your brother becomes poor, do not take interest or profit from him, but fear your God. So Judaism in its primary scriptures is no different than Islam and does not approve of usury. And somebody asked about Jesus' position and usury in the chat. And if anything, Jesus didn't say much. But in the parable of the talents, he did say, when he told that parable, that the one who had the 1 talent should have put the money and got interest back on it at least. So Jesus was probably the one who made more concessions to usury in that parable. But Judaism, like Islam, does not countenance officially that charging money interest is acceptable.
Well, I would like to get to a couple stories, mainly regarding what's been going on this past week, because it's been this has been a big week. Very, very interesting. The fallout, the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk event has just been absolutely amazing, just to say the least. So, and now I am pretty much 100% convinced that this was a Wag the Charlie event, aka just like the Trump shooting, so-called shooting from last year in Butler, another false flag in order to achieve results. You're cutting out really bad, Webby. We can't really hear you. And this is one of those things that has happened that put a smile on my face as soon as I heard this. Oh my goodness! All right, let's get to it. New York Times: ABC pulls Jimmy Kimmel off air for Charlie Kirk comments after FCC pressure. Mr. Kimmel faced criticism from the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission for remarks about the policies of the man who was accused of killing Mr. Kirk, the conservative activist. Now, let me preface this by first saying I 100% despise the FCC as an institution. I don't think it should be a thing. I really do. I really heavily dislike it because of what it does and what it has done over the years. So if we could get rid of it, I would really like that. But I just wanted to just preface this by saying that. So, rebuttal by Anti-New York Times. The scriptwriters at White Hat Productions are not only masters at creating dramatic tension and plot twists, but their comedy routines are just as entertaining and just as creative. Follow the labyrinthian lunacy here. A fake Jimmy Kimmel has just been imaginarily pulled off the air by a major network that no longer exists, as a free entity, I mean, for suggesting that the imaginary assassin, Tyler Robinson, quotes, of the very much alive and well Charlie Kirk was actually a right-winger, not a left-winger. Holy smokes! One can sometimes actually appreciate why outsiders regard us Q-tards as insane. And yet, this seemingly outlandish sequence of events is exactly what has transpired and is continuing to play out. As candidate Donald Trump and later as President Trump, the deep state operatives of influential late-night TV savaged and humiliated the man who now fronts for the Q military operation. Night after night after night, for years, the commie comics would recite their assigned disrespectful diatribes and sarcastic quips, while the pathetic and contemptible approving morons in the audience clapped like seals and giggled like little girls. Millions of libtards watching at home did likewise. No more. We are confident that the likes of Messrs. Kimmel, a suspected child rapist, Stephen Colbert, a suspected child rapist, Bill Maher, a suspected child rapist, Jon Stewart, Jimmy Fallon, and Seth Meyers were long ago dealt with by the brash billionaire who openly described himself as one who loves to get even with people, quote unquote. That's Trump. Like so many others in Hollywood and the world of politics, the commie comics are long gone. What we are witnessing now with their public demise constitutes part of the great replay, which the editorial board of the Anti-New York Times has been forecasting for some time now. Stewart, Colbert, Kimmel, Myers, Fallon, Maher, all dealt with and switched out. Now, I don't know if I personally agree with that particular sentiment, but that's beside the point. This surprising / though not surprising development really does confirm the reality of the Q operation's control over the media. ABC is now ABQ. From the article, quote, the abrupt decision by the network, which is owned by the Walt Disney Company, came hours after the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, Brennan Carr, assailed Mr. Kimmel and suggested that his regulatory agency might take action against ABC because of remarks the host made on his Monday telecast. The network did not explain its decision, but the sequence of events on Wednesday amounted to an extraordinary exertion of political pressure on a major broadcast network by the Trump administration. End quote. The action against Kimmel follows CBS's agreement to pay $16 million to settle a lawsuit filed by Trump. CBS had also recently canceled The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Next up in Trump's crosshairs, by his own words, are Seth Meyers and Jimmy Fallon. So much winning and so much laughing too. The Godfather, and Trump is pretty much a representation of that movie right now. Two total losers. After Kimmel, Trump targets Jimmy Fallon, Seth Meyers. Donald Trump shifted his focus to fellow late-night comedians Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers, both of whom have also been frequent critics of his presidency. FAFO equals fuck around and find out. And that's pretty much how, and you know, whether it's true or not that these people are dead or have been switched out doesn't really matter. Because at the end of the day, what this is doing is putting down these so-called comedians, aka these front men, mouthpieces for the Democrat Party. And, you know, I've seen, you know, you see these common leftists online coming out and say, this is an attack on free speech. This is an attack on no, this is not free speech. This is incitement to violence, what these people do. What these people on the left have been doing is not free speech. They are inciting their, quite frankly, psychotic base to go out and attack and kill people. And that's exactly what and that's exactly the story that's being used for the Charlie Kirk event. So whether it's real or not, the Charlie Kirk thing, at the end of the day, these people, these so-called late night comedians are in the crosshairs because all they have been for a long time now, again, it's just been mouthpieces for the left. And they've been completely anti-Trump, completely anti-conservative, anti-Christian, etc. And right now, that is probably exemplified the most right now in what happened with Jimmy Kimmel. And also The View as well. The View is another one I'm hoping is in the crosshairs because, as we know, the cackling heads on The View are some of the biggest leftist POSs ever, and they're absolutely disgusting. So I'm hoping that they're next in the crosshairs. So, yeah, the late night comedians, they're done. These people are finished. I mean, they weren't even funny anyway. These people like Bill Maher and Jimmy Kimmel, they weren't even funny anyway. So, let me ask you guys: do you guys in the UK? Do you guys have your own late night comedians, your own versions of Bill Maher, Jimmy Kimmel, etc.?
Thankfully, no. But the thing about Kimmel, the thing that so I watched this.
Taylor,
you're cutting out, but I can somewhat hear you. Can't hear you now. Why don't you just type what you're going to say in the private chat?
Yeah. Well, while he's just offline again, I'll just finish that point I was making about Jimmy Kimmel. Obviously, a lot of the leftists were losing it and saying that he'd been shut down unfairly. But the reality is that he's basically.
Hey, I'm here.
Yeah. So what happened at the time? I could see a lot of threads on Facebook, and loads of these things were circulating on the newsfeed, and they were making out that obviously Jimmy Kimmel's freedom of speech. Well, they were talking about their freedom of speech, but the freedom of the press and freedom of individual speech are not quite the same thing. So obviously, the problem with what Jimmy Kimmel said, I don't think there's any point getting into cancel culture from the right as revengeance and retribution against what the left did. I think the problem with what Kimmel did was not the fact that he had an opinion and he expressed it, but within less than a week after the Charlie Kirk event, which has polarized the whole country and the world, but particularly America, as a 50-50 split, his opening statement was effectively that the right were trying to pin the assassin as a leftist when it was really one of their own. That was his opening point. So what he was doing, he was fomenting further division right across the country. That's not about him expressing freedom of speech. What that's doing is, as an influencer in media, impacting a lot of people, instead of what you would do if you were a sane and decent human being, you would tamp it down. You wouldn't pour oil on the fire. Jimmy Kimmel has poured oil on the fire. And even though, you know, is it ABC network, basically, they've done what any decent employer would do, even if they're corrupted normally. And they've said, this isn't the time for that. They didn't cancel him. They just said, for now, it's temporarily suspended. And that's wise at a time when it's a melting pot. You should not be fomenting it by basically galvanizing all the leftists. That's 50% of the US population to come out and support it. He was pouring oil on the fire. And what happened to him actually was very mild. They just took him off air for a while.
Well, let me counter what you said real quick by saying,
yeah, Alex.
Yeah.
You're cutting out really bad, man. Why don't you just type what you're going to say in the private chat? So that way that's it.
Does that not? Because it's a live show, Taylor.
Damn, the power of the power of tech.
Hello, can people hear me?
Yeah.
Right now we can, but it's crazy.
Go on, Paul.
I think he's trying to, but he can't. Well, let me just make a counterpoint to what you're saying real quick while Webby gets does this thing. I would say this is not a 50-50 split. This is more of a, I would actually say this is more of a 90-10 split, if even that. The majority of people are, especially sane people, are on board with, even if they're not a fan of Charlie Kirk and don't agree with him or his politics. The fact is that they're at least considerate enough to be to respect the fact that he was a free thinker, that he was a debater, that he just wanted honest debate, and that he did not call for violence. And also, and even above that, the fact that he was a father, a husband, etc. He had a family. So 90% of the public, despite what the media might try to portray it as, 90% of the public is sympathetic to the assassination. It's only the very loud minority, these hardcore, crazy leftists on TikTok and Facebook that are coming out and saying that it was a good thing he was assassinated. But again, this is the minority, because at this point, so many people on the left are leaving the left. You can even see it on social media. Countless amounts of people, even some hardcore lefties, are leaving the left because not to join the right necessarily, but to become an independent, because they understand that the left has become a murder cult, which that dwells in misery and murder and death and pretty much everything that's evil, and they don't want to be a part of that. And this further shows, by the way, that this whole thing is Wag the Dog, that this whole thing is a scripted event. Because no matter how stupid you are, no matter how corrupt you are, no one big like Jimmy Kimmel is stupid enough to go out on television and destroy his whole career in an instant by saying what he did. Because the deep state, the way that they was, even though they did make mistakes, they weren't stupid. They were very intelligent, and they understand how human psychology works, as you and I both know.
Do you think
so? And so, at the end of the day, this pretty much indirectly, at least if it doesn't prove it's good evidence, it's more good evidence among so much else This whole event is just is a psyop to kill off these characters and to get people against the left, because the harder the left pushes against the majority and pushes against common sense and decency, the more people turn against them. And that's exactly what is going on. That's what, again, as I've mentioned many times before, that's what AOC, Ilhan Omar, Zoran Mandami, and all these others are for, is to push the left so hard, radical in the optical realm, to the point of where the majority of the public will turn against them. And as Q said, only 4 to 6% of the population will be lost forever. The rest will turn against the Marxist Democrat left establishment. So at the end of the day, this is all really going according to, this is all part of the 40,000 foot view Q plan. When you look at it from that angle, it's absolutely amazing. And you know, I'll say one more thing before I hand it back to you. That's the fact that The View has also come under a lot of scrutiny because they did not address the Jimmy Kimmel event. Both The View and Jimmy Kimmel are both ABC. They were both aired on ABC stations. Yeah. And yet they did not say anything about Jimmy Kimmel, and it's got a lot of people that watches them to call them out and say, "What the hell? Why did you not talk about Jimmy Kimmel? Were they forced to shut up by their executives, or do they just or are they scared?" That whole thing. So it's got a lot of pushback for them as well, which is why.
But even Letterman supported Kimmel.
Yeah, David Letterman. Yeah.
And he was considered to be quite a bit more moderate, and even he's come out in support. So there have been some fairly, historically mainstream figures who were not considered to be extreme, who seem to have come out and turned it into some sort of free speech issue. It isn't a free speech issue. It's a freedom of the press issue. But the problem with that is, when the press was co-opted into leftism for so long, sometimes you've got to shut the press down just temporarily. I mean, what they've done, they made comparisons with Nazi Germany. It's just too easy to, in the 1930s. And I see all these people in the States on the left, and a lot of them claiming that this is like this Nazi era and is shutting down free speech. And this narrative is still very powerful. And it's rallying a lot of people to believe that they're propagandizing Trump still. They just have far less power to do so than when they did in 2016 to 2020. But it's still happening. There's still pushback against him.
Well, yeah, of course, because you have the Q-controlled leftist media that are still putting on the optics of being against Trump because
don't forget.
What? All I heard was
Paul,
no offense.
It's like Paul's been kidnapped, right, by an alien, and every time he wants to say this really significant thing, it gags him. He's chomping at the bit to say this thing.
There he goes.
Yeah, he's been gagged. He's being gagged. He's his voice. His voice is shouting louder, but he can't get through the signal. It's a demon. Come on, Paul. Overcome it. Let's cast it out.
Come on, man.
In the digital airways. Come on. We need you back, mate.
Yeah, you got this. You got this, Webby. You got this, man. Oh, man. But yeah, like I said, just this whole thing. It's, and by the way, I just want to mention about the whole free speech thing. Again, this has nothing to do with free speech, and this has nothing to do with freedom of the press. This is incitement to violence. This is incitement. Yeah. This is telling a flat out lie on the news, on national TV. And if it was some random dude on the internet saying this, that would be one thing. But when you're an influencer and you have a big show on TV, you can't be doing that shit.
No, I agree.
And so anyone calling this a free speech issue, just shut the fuck up.
Yeah, just total retardation. I mean, normally I don't get baited into this, but some of these, I couldn't believe the sheer number of people who were coming out with this. And
this is not. Let me say this. Let me say this first. This is not cancel culture. This is accountability culture.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Totally. But I think it would help if the so-called right, because there is no such thing as the right as far as I'm concerned, it's just that the left has colonized everything and just calls everything that's not extreme left right. But they've basically just worked a number for too long. And what we're seeing is the pendulum swing back. And, you know, sometimes temporarily, you've got to take people's voice away, just temporarily, so that they can't say these outrageous things. And you know, eventually, if they calm down, give them that chance to, if they can prove themselves rational, communicative people. But the left traditionally, of course, they were grounded in just shutting debate down. They're not interested they're not really interested in speech, never mind free speech, because if you speak, you're supposed to say something intelligent, and they're not capable of that. That's why they have cancel culture, to stop debate. So I find it ironic that these radical leftists want freedom of speech. It's not in their interest to have freedom of speech, because if they had, they'd come up, very badly.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, these people, they don't give a damn about free speech, because because the left is full of just projection and hypocrisy. That's exactly what they've always been. And you know, and whenever they talk about free speech, all you have to do is just look back on the last 10 or so years when the leftist controlled mainstream media and social media networks were canceling people, blacklisting people, and shutting down their accounts just for having a different opinion than the majority. Like, say, for example, thinking that Hitler's a good person and all that, or thinking that 9/11 was an inside job, or being against the jab, etc. And then you were canceled for that. Meanwhile, what the left is doing is inciting to violence and inciting their radical base to do crazy shit. So at the end of the day, never take anything the left says seriously. They're just full of hypocrisy, projection at the end of the day. And
yeah. Well, Dennis has said in the chat, there is no left or right FFS. Now, I would disagree. I'd say,
okay, hold on. Let me just cut you off there and just say, Denny is a black pill king. Don't take what he says seriously. He just tries to start.
Oh yeah, but interestingly, I don't think there is a right as such, but there is a left, because the most extreme left is communism. And communism is the project and the experiment that is now successfully Yuri Bezmenov. It is now that's what's in the World Economic Forum. It's leftism. And so what's happening is it's communism is being imposed. Even the Green New Deal that was put forward by occasional cortex, that's communism. It's just green communism. It's just communism smuggled under green environmental policy. So there is a left, and the left has been on the throne for ages. Now, I think there have been times in the past, many decades ago, when the right was on the throne. And then there was something called a right, and the left was defined with respect to left was defined with respect to the right. Now it's just the left in all the positions of power. And then, of course, you talk about Q, that Q's been actually shifting this. And there's been a massive or a gargantuan battle between the established left, or the deep state, which was communist, and the WEF and all these other states and these quangos, and that Trump and the military and this covert op has gradually turned that around. They've been booted out of the media. So it's like a cosmic struggle, but not really with spiritual entities first and foremost, but with these geopolitical entities, these powerful families, and Paul would talk about bloodlines. So there's definitely been this historical battle going on in significant families, blue bloods, and so on and so forth, for control of the world. We believe that there are spiritual entities, even deeper behind that struggle. Ike would say there are lizards. There's a whole thing now that people say, Luke, there have been these subterranean, basically alien types who have tried to terraform, and they're trying to terraform this earth now, like the Borg did in Star Trek. They're putting chemtrails in. They want the crops all corrupting. They don't want perennials. They want control of it through gates, and ultimately now they are terraforming this earth, and they're basically trying to replace us, carbon-based life forms, with silicone-based life forms. Now, Ike spoke about these things. We think it's a bit left field and sci-fi, but you've got all those perspectives as well that believe that there's like some alien influence that's been here for millennia.
Well, at the end of the day, there will always be good and evil in this world. As long as we're human, as long as we live in this world, there will always be good and evil. And that's the funny thing. That's the thing I say, and that's the thing I want to say to as well to people in the chat who want to say that, oh, everyone's on the same side. They're all playing for the same side. Look, that black pill
that black pill attitude of thinking that there's no good guys, that there's no good in this world in terms of, or at least on the higher levels of politics and of society, it's just quite frankly retarded. I'm going to be frank with it. It's retarded because that's not how the world works. There's always been good guys on working to undermine the communist / globalist / Zionist agenda. And I can name several examples just off the top of my head going back 100 years of the good guys pushing back against this new world order. So if anyone wants to say that there's no good in this world or that everyone's playing on the same side, yada 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 yada, just I don't even take that crap seriously anymore. Honestly, that crap honestly bothers me more than the lefties who sprout their liberal leftist nonsense. Because at the end of the day, we know that these people are what they're going to say. But the black pill people, that we're supposed to be on the same side at the end of the day. We're supposed to be fighting. We're supposed to be fighting against these evil cabal members and having discussions and such. But then these people just want to divide us with their black pillness, and I don't have any tolerance for it. I'm not gonna lie, I don't have any tolerance for this whole they are all fighting on the same side garbage, because it's so stupid. It's so easy to debunk it, and people just don't want to listen. And I don't have any, and they're just as bad as the lefties when it comes to that. They don't want to debate it. They don't want to listen. They don't want to accept the evidence. They don't want to look. They just want to sit there and just keep on sitting in their misery in their black pilling ways. And I don't want to have any part of it. I'm going to be honest. I don't want to have any part of that shit. So
yeah.
But and let me preface that by saying that I'm not saying that everyone needs to believe in Q or the plan or anything like that, because that's a whole different discussion. But just in general, this whole idea that there's no good in the world and everyone's fighting on the same side, it's just so I could believe that back in like 2017, 2018. But
I'm going to tell you, I'm going to come with a big revelation to you, Taylor. There's only two sides. There's only two sides. No matter who you're talking about, there's only two sides. You're either with God or you're not with God. Right? So you're either with God or you're not with God. All the stuff that we're talking about is all the distractions about how they can justify things, how we can do this, how we can do that, how life should be, how life has been, and this is what we should do. And nobody bothers with what the actual word of God says. Because when we get into the religions, none of them talk about what actually God is speaking about. So I kind of agree with you on so many levels, Taylor, until we get to the point where people are being just brushed along with all this propaganda and stuff from people. And again, I've said it from day one when I started this podcast, was the only truth that I found was the Bible. And again, this is the rock. This is the foundation. It's the word of God. It's not some bloke who went, you are that. Yeah, I'm going to build it around you. That's not what happened. Nobody saw Jesus as who he was. They all saw him as something else. People say this. People say that. But what do you think? And Peter said, you're the Son of the true living God. And it's on that rock, that revelation, not Peter, on that rock, that revelation, that's where the truth is. Look at my word. Look at what I've written. Nothing changes. All the prophecies are there. I'm fulfilling them as we go. But nobody bothers to take the time out to read those things for themselves. They want to base it on a load of bollocks, what they've amassed from loads of kinds of information. Sometimes you've got to, Alex will know this, sometimes all the information you've got to throw it all on the floor and start again from the basis. And that's when you find the truth. And the truth is not in all these man-made stuff. I think there's a lot of truth in what you talk about, Taylor, especially with the Q stuff. But I also think it's part of the whole distraction. You're just not quite there yet, but your analytical brain, you won't be able to stop yourself in the end. It happened to me, it happened to Alex, it happens to everybody in the end.
Well,
At the end of the day, I don't disagree with you. God, of course, is the ultimate answer.
Amen.
But at the end of the day, we got people have to go one step at a time. Everyone's journey is a different length. It all just depends on where they are in life and where they're going. So the only thing that we can do is God.
Taylor, it also depends on your ability to be open, not to be focused enough to be shut in. If I'd have been focused and shut in, I wouldn't be talking to you today. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be talking about this stuff. Something will prize that open. And that's what I keep saying to you. You keep saying I've got a definitive thing about this. Is from a certain aspect, but we've got to keep the open.
The StreamYard's messing with you again, man.
I think you have.
StreamYard again. Oh my god. Alex, I legitimately think now that StreamYard is just trying to sabotage Webby, man.
There's something's going on.
StreamYard's an atheist. StreamYard's an atheist, and it doesn't want to hear freaking Webby talk about God.
Yeah,
something.
He must be onto something.
Of course, yep. Oh man, but yeah, I agree with you, Webby. Absolutely, what you're saying. At the end of the day, we have to be open-minded, and people on the left, a lot of them just are not open-minded, and I would say that right now, a lot of them are being forced to become open-minded. Like literally, their worldview is being pried open. Because at the end of the day, this Charlie Kirk event really has done is it's really forced people to reevaluate their thought process and reevaluate the way that they think about politics and just life in general. It's really been it's basically the George Floyd moment, except for the right. It's for the good cause, because unlike George Floyd, which was a deep state operation, a psyop in order to turn people, in order to have a public excuse for the Antifas and all that stuff back in 2020. What this event has done is exact opposite of that, which is getting people away from this leftist communist mania and more, quite frankly, in favor of God, because we know that Charlie Kirk, I don't know him obviously I don't know him on a personal level, but the narrative is that he was very close to God, and that he was a Christian, and that he believes that God is the ultimate answer for everything. And because of that, and because everyone's feeling sorry for his assassination, now a lot more people are rethinking that whole spirituality, etc. So this whole thing has really been a very positive move from the standpoint of changing the public's mind, whether the event was real or not. So at the end of the day, I'm really enjoying what we're seeing going on right now in terms of the public and the optics of the public. Obviously, you're going to have those annoying minority, really loud lefties who are just going to be stupid and say stupid shit. But at the end of the day, they're the loud minority. So just try to ignore that crap and just look at all, try to ignore the negativity and just look at all the positive videos of people online coming out and denouncing their Democrats affiliation or leftist affiliation. Even if they're not necessarily joining the right, they don't have to. At the end of the day, just getting them away from that leftist camp is what's important, and getting them more into to think about God and the Bible, etc., which is what this has really done. And honestly, it's really put a smile on my face. This Q operation has really done such a fantastic job so far. And even though it's taking a long time for us to get to the justice phase of optically arresting these people and revealing the Epstein list and 9/11 truth and all that stuff, at the end of the day, regardless of how long it takes, and I'm hoping it doesn't take much longer, but regardless of how long it takes, the fact of the matter is that we can't deny is that there is progress always being made on every front, whether it's cultural, political, academia, economic, etc. I mean, we just had a rate cut from the Federal Reserve as well, so that's so Trump's economic policies should start showing their positivity going in soon. So everything is moving in the positive direction. It's just a matter of how long.
That's interesting, Taylor, because I think in the States, yes, but over here the news has broken recently that I think it's this week. Our Uncle Keith Starmer has basically now it's full tracking of bank accounts. So if somebody takes out of a cash machine more than £200, which is about $250 in a week, their account will be flagged and monitored. So they're moving towards digital currency imposition. And, you know, Keir Starmer is now implementing these policies to track people's bank accounts. And this is just coming in. It's just started around this week. So certainly this side of the pond, we're having a different sort of scenario economically. The move towards digital currency is gathering pace. When you go into supermarkets here now, they're replacing more and more checkouts with automated. And at one time, you used to be able to get cash or card. Now in Lidl, one of our supermarkets, all the machines that they're putting in now, in the new ones, they are card only. And they're now having to get cashiers if someone wants to pay in cash late at night. They're having to call for a cashier to come out to open a till. So they are automating everything and moving us towards digital ID. And there's talk now that people won't be able to access pensions and other things unless they sign up for a digital ID. So there's no doubt about it. Central bank digital currency is being brought in. And that's one of the control systems, cashless. And that appears to be carrying on apace. Now, I don't know how that's being read stateside and what Trump's view is on that. But certainly this side, Starmer is really railroading it through very fast.
Well, actually, yeah. We might as well talk about the UK and Europe at the moment. What's going on there at the moment? And I can't say for certain because I don't live in Europe, but I will say this, and that's that. Just like with AOC and the squad over here, when you have these hardcore commie pinko optics for these politicians and these media moguls, it turns more and more people against them. And my guess as to why it's taking much longer in Europe to get your own version of Trump or to optically fight back against this is because, unfortunately, as it stands, Europe is just far more in the turd pool than the United States, because you guys started going hardcore left after World War II with the Marshall Plan, the IMF, et cetera, when the Council on Foreign Relations people, the Rockefeller types, the Rothschild types came in and basically remade your constitutions and your countries from the ground up. So unfortunately, you guys, especially in Western Europe, I've really been on these, really been sunk deep into the turd pool. So my guess is that why the optics are so much worse over there is because it takes that much more of a kick in the balls, essentially, to get people to realize that, hey, this system is evil and we need to get rid of it. And we need to push back against it, especially after seeing how good the United States is going right now. A lot of people, especially in the UK and in Western Europe, really want a United States type system over there in Europe. But right now we have the optics of Keir Starmer and all these Macron, etc., pushing back against it. Which now we have people like what's his name? I always forget his name. The guy that's like the Trump of Britain. What's
Farage.
his name? Nigel Farage. Yeah, Nigel Farage. I don't know for sure, but it looks like it's being set up that he's going to become the next. When's your guys' next election? If you don't mind me asking.
It should be in 2029, but they reckon it's going to be 2027.
Shit, that's a while away. I thought it would be this
year. That's if they don't collapse the government. That's if they don't collapse this government.
Yeah.
Yeah, they might not even do it via election. They might just collapse the whole thing and then just say, hey, this communist system of a massive illegal immigration and the central banking crap and all this other stuff like, digital ID and all that is just not working.
That's the problem, Taylor. That's the problem. The solution is the digital IDs. That's what's going to be pushed in front of us. It's what people are people going to accept it? Once upon a time, I would have said no, but then I saw what happened with COVID. I'm seeing what's happening now with new vaccines that are saying, yeah, come and get them, and people are going getting them. Yet we've got all these figures that show that these things didn't work. These things have made things worse. They certainly didn't make things better. We certainly know that the masks and all these other things that were put in place just didn't work. It made things worse. It's made society worse. But you certainly saw that sifting. You saw the people who would follow this system, who would willingly go and have these, and unfortunately family and friends did that. Will they do it again? I can't say no, they won't, because they've said they won't, but I can't say it. But I've, when you have new things to fight for in this world, you've just got to stand up. And I think at the end of the day, all the debates that we have, there's going to be a line. When are you going to draw that line? Because people are drawing lines wherever they feel like. A bit like if you want to identify as a cat on a Tuesday afternoon, you can do that. You can draw these lines, but things are catching up on us. Things are penning us in. We are on a farm after all. Just because we've now got a bit of knowledge doesn't mean we can see where the fences are and we can move those fences, because we seem to be still stuck there.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, politics is downstream from culture, and culture is usually manufactured by the people who control the culture. So your Hollywood types, your bankers, etc. And so, that's why you have to manufacture consent with the public at large, because once the culture changes, even if it's artificial, if the culture changes, the politics change, because that's what the people are going to want. They want stuff that fits in with their culture. And right now, the people in the UK, I can tell just from, again, I don't live there, so I don't have a firsthand experience, but I can say just by looking at videos online and looking at articles and stuff from people who do live there, that a good amount of the people in the UK are sick of what's going on over there. They're sick of this. They're sick of all this draconian measures. They're sick and tired of all this illegal immigration, etc. And they're sick of Keir Starmer's nonsense. So, and this is a thing across all of Western Europe in general. So, my view on it, at least, is that as bad as things are now, it's only going to go uphill in the future. It's all just a matter of when is that moment going to happen, and I cannot give you the answer to that. So, all I can say is just try to hang in there and try to have a positive outlook on the future, because that's what I'm seeing in terms of Europe. I see you guys going uphill from here.
But we've got these situations, Taylor, where we walk into a room, the person on the left is going to shoot me in the face. The person on the right is going to stab me. Oh, well, if I get shot in my face, compared to a stabbing, I could possibly survive a stabbing and we could make things better. So that's better than the shooting. That's what we're basically voting on. We're going into these situations completely unarmed, completely blind, because the monetary situation that we've got with our government, and you is what we do. But from our system, we're paying bills that we shouldn't be paying because creditors set off, because creditors are the basis of the economy. We're the fulcrum of this economy. If the creditors are doing well, the economy's doing well. But they've attacked the economy, and they've attacked it by saying you've got to work hard and pay your bills. Well, debtors pay bills in the debt-based economy. So debtors are paying, creditors set off. That means something's wrong there. People, Taylor, in this country can't understand that. So the stuff that you're talking about is immaterial because it's affected by what I've just said, but people can only see what you're talking about. They can't see what they're doing, what they've been groomed into a society to do. They don't see that systems like the police the prison service can't rehabilitate prisoners because their customer will not come back to them. And that customer will no longer be a customer for the police. When we're all business-based and commerce-based, like the Babylon system is, these are the parts we play. So if people can't, what you're saying is absolutely correct. What you're saying is absolutely correct, but they can't understand why we're stuck in this system. They don't understand what they've done wrong, and then they don't understand what world they've grown up in, and they don't understand who they are. Once you have a basis of that, even if it's not conscious, people don't know who they are. People can be easily manipulated into whatever world this is, to the point where a grown man can identify as a cat or a coffee table on a Tuesday afternoon and be addressed as Deirdre if he likes. Well, this is going off into fantasy worlds that have a little bit of reality but not much common sense.
Well, we are coming up on our 2-hour mark. I'm not sure if we're going to go over because we had a late start.
According to my timer, we've got 1 hour 40 minutes on the clock. So we've got 20 minutes. So if you've got something to present, Taylor, if you've got some wrapping up to do, we can do. I have got a video that I want to play us out with because I just think it might tick a few boxes. So take it away, Taylor, if you've got something.
Okay. And that is hold on, let me share this real quick. Also, I'm glad that I'm not getting any kind of annoying freaking errors in terms of my sharing of stuff because I got worried about that considering what's happening with you. So okay, so first we talked about Jimmy Kimmel. So we talked about the late night hosts and what's happening with them. Now let's talk about the media. So CNN, Trump files $15 billion defamation lawsuit against the New York Times. New York Times, Trump sues the New York Times for articles questioning his success. The lawsuit filed by the president in federal court in Florida claims the Times defamed him and sought to undermine his campaign in the 2024 election. Oh, yes, we're getting to this now.
Taylor, can you see how articles like this between the New York Times and the suing and all this, can you see that there's money laundering that's going on in between all that? It's not just about cases. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, obviously money is going to be made at the end of the day because, you have to defund these platforms in order to get them out of here. So, there are some cases where that's justified. It just depends on the context. I would say the context here is very much justified. This is, we know what the New York Times is. Oh boy. It's kind of like the equivalent of me of saying if you shoot someone during wartime, it's considered justice. If you shoot someone during peacetime, it's considered a murder. So, context matters at the end of the day. So, but continuing. The Q war on fake news continues, and what a rout it is on replay. As the editorial board of the anti-New York Times has been saying repeatedly and unambiguously for several years now, the Q operation's continuity government takeover of the Judean press /fake news had 3 strategic strategies to it. 1, Insert, by command, stories, psyops, and opinions which the scriptwriters at White Hat Productions wanted to be widely known. 2, keep any clue of the secret operation from reaching the broad masses of normiedom, only as quote-unquote Q-tards are supposed to know. And 3, replay the destruction of the Judean press by having the conquered parties dig their own graves, so to speak, with just enough fake news needed to maintain the illusion. This story about Commander Trump's massive lawsuit against the once untouchable paper of record fits Objective 3 perfectly. From the CNN article, quote, President Donald Trump says he is filing an audacious lawsuit against the New York Times, alleging defamation and accusing the outlet of being a virtual mouthpiece for the Democrat Party. That's exactly what it is, by the way. The lawsuit demands $15 billion in damages, which exceeds the entire market cap of the New York Times company, and claims Trump is leading an effort to restore integrity to journalism. The New York Times has been allowed to freely lie, smear, and defame me for far too long, and that stops now, he added, while singling out the Times' endorsement of Kamala Harris during the 2024 presidential election, end quote. And let me just say this real quick, that being that the MSM market, the media rather as a whole, the only way that they listen is through money. That's the only way that these big corporations will listen to anything, is if their paycheck is threatened. So, unfortunately, that's just what has to happen sometimes. Anyway, continuing. We shall see if the scriptwriters have the financial obliteration of Sulzberger slimes written into the script or not. Regardless of how this plays out, the fact remains the mainstream media belongs to the military now and will never be able to torment and bamboozle us again. Winning. Q Post 1822, August 2018. Fake news is not free and independent. Fake news media equals propaganda arm of the Democratic Party. And that's exactly what it is. This was stated 7 years ago, and it's still just as true. Trump lawsuit, September 2025. Today, the Times is a full-throated mouthpiece of the Democrat Party. 7 years and 1 month later, and Trump restates what Q stated back in 2018. Of course, Trump isn't the only one to say this, obviously, but since he's the president, he's got the biggest mouth on this. How the military is handling the journalistic jackals. 1. Write this, motherfucker. If you say anything about this, you're dead, motherfucker. Now hop into the grave you just dug, motherfucker. So that's exactly what's happening with the media now, because obviously not everyone's going to be not everyone's going to be replaced. So, motivated by an intense hatred for the sickeningly satanic gaslighting emanating from the daily pages of the oh-so-prestigious New York paper of record, the late, great Saint Sugar the Conspiracy Cat, well, that's the writer's cat that died a few years ago, and I launched the Anti-New York Times as a sub-feature of our site, then known as TomatoBubble.com, way back in May of 2013. Day after day, week after week, year after year, the task of rebutting the conveyor belt of lies pouring forth from the Manhattan Mendacity factory seemed as useless as it was upsetting. Yet, in spite of being admittedly black-pilled, we carried on in spite of it all. Someone had to chronicle the final fall of the badly decaying remnants of civilization. Why not us, we reckoned. Who in their right mind could possibly have imagined that the day was coming when the Jewish mafia's mightiest artillery piece would be seized and inflicted upon them? Q did. That's who. The term fake news appeared 183 times in the Q posts, and this is a link to them. And more than 100 mainstream journalists were specifically cited by name, along with the threat that many of them would be punished for their treason. It was further revealed that it was the Mossad acting above the CIA, coordinating both subversive mainstream media as well as many alt media sources. The Q posts, like fine wine, have in so many different areas aged very, very well. So well that even the nasty black pill addicts seem to have disappeared from my comment inbox lately. Been saying it for nearly 8 years now. Trust the plan. Q post 32 from November 1st, 2017. This is just after he started posting. Not even the MSM can hide, and rest assured some will be jailed as deep cover agents. Q. One of those being Rachel Maddow, or Rachel Madcow, as I like to call her. So, this here, the Zionist globalist Adolf Ochs purchased the Anglo-Republican Times in 1896. After his death in 1935, control of the paper of record remained in the hands of his Sulzberger son-in-law. Generation after generation, the little-known and untouchable Sulzbergers controlled the mighty newspaper, which served as the guiding light for the rest of fake news, until it was seized from them by the Q operation under authority of Trump's Executive Order 13818. So, I'll give a little bit of backstory, but I'll keep it brief because I want to give Webby a bit of time to do his thing as well. That being that the New York Times was founded by the co-founder of the Republican Party, Henry Jarvis Raymond, I think in 1853 or 1860, around that time. And it was a hardcore conservative populist newspaper. It was really good at the time. I've read some of its issues from that era, during the Civil War era, and it was very good. They would openly talk about even the Rothschilds and secret societies in it. It was amazing. Then you get to 1896. After the 1893 stock market crash, engineered by the cabal, of course, the New York Times was on its ass because they couldn't afford advertisers at the time. So it was bought off by Sulzberger. I forget the first name, but yeah, his by Sulzberger, who was Jewish. He was from I forget which country in Europe. Then he slowly progressed the magazine toward the left. It was one of the biggest contributors in the media to helping establish the Federal Reserve in 1913. And then he passed it down to his sons, the Sulzbergers, and then it just continued up to this day. Because, as you know, the New York Times is the foundation for the rest of the fake news, who get their stories from the morning issues of the New York Times each day. So it's a big deal. And I'll say one more thing here. Commander Trump's open references to the name Sulzberger and his description of the family newspaper as enemy of the people were astonishing and unprecedented. This is a Twitter post from Trump back in July 29th, 2018. Had a very good and interesting meeting at the White House with A.G. Sulzberger, publisher of the New York Times. Spent much time talking about the vast amounts of fake news being put out by the media and how that fake news has morphed into the phrase enemy of the people. Sad. He's the only person I know in mainstream with any kind of voice that has actually mentioned the name Sulzberger. Absolutely amazing, exposing these, pardon my French, these fuckers, and putting them out in the open for people to be able to see them. These people who were once hidden behind the scenes that nobody knew about are now becoming public knowledge. It's amazing.
Those pictures that you posted, they all had stars underneath them. People think of it as the Star of David. Do you know which ones I meant?
What?
The pictures that you were posting, they had stars of David underneath the pictures.
Yeah.
Didn't they?
Yes.
Right. So the Star of David, you associate that with Jews and Israel. Yes.
That's what it's mainly associated with. Yes.
Do you associate that with them?
I know it's not the only thing that's it's associated with, but that's mainly what I usually think of it.
You do know that is the Star of Remphan, and that belongs to the synagogue of Satan. So it's nothing to do with David. No. So those Jews that sit under that star, those people that support that star, they are not supporting the God of Israel and his people. They have nothing to do with it. That is the Star of Remphan. So that is Rephaim, that is Nephilim, that is fallen angel, that is Baal, that is Ishtar, Easter. All this shit comes from the same stuff. And all those people that you've pointed out that are making all these major moves, Taylor, are all Remphan. They're all supporters of Baal. They're all supporters of that bloodline. It's nothing to do with God. It's the rebellion against God. You are absolutely on point, pointing everybody out who's involved in this. But what you don't realise is you're pointing out the ones who are rebelling against God, and they're the ones that are going to have the comeuppance.
You're not wrong.
You're only in two parties. You're either against God or you're with God. There's no in between. If you're lukewarm, which is in between, is going to spew you out. So it's time that people have got to wake up. That's what this show's about. We're trying to bring the two worlds close enough together where people can discern. That's, well, look at where that's come from. But when you've got fixed things, I can throw that to me and Alex, you know, it's the only truth I've found. If you want to come and debate about the Bible being wrong, then you believe, we'll tell you.
Power of StreamYard, man. Can't hear a damn thing you're saying.
Well, if nobody, but what I'm saying is, celebrating forefront. What we're seeing is now is we're seeing this Star of David, which isn't anything to do with David. We're seeing Refam, Remfam, 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 and we're seeing people bow into this, and we're seeing people fall on ideologies, and we're also seeing division being brought by religions. That's why we need to find what the truth is. I found the truth in the scripture.
But it also reflects Moloch, doesn't it? And Moloch sacrifice, all about sacrifice of the children in the fire. And so the whole abortion thing, abortion's under that umbrella as well.
Yeah, Baal and Moloch go together. Ishtar. If Ishtar's there, and what do Christians do? Oh, Jesus was crucified on Good Friday and he got up again on Sunday. Yay. No. And that's Ishtar. That's Easter. So if Ishtar's there, Baal's there. If Baal's there, Moloch's there. And if Moloch's there,
it's the child sacrifice.
We're not on good foundation here, because you know whoever has an eldest child, that eldest child wouldn't be here in that culture, because you would have sacrificed that child for a good crop that year, and you'd have been expected to do that. And what do our scriptures say, Alex? I never asked you to do that. Never even entered me head. What are you doing? You knobheads. Maniacs. So we need
that's the point.
Solution.
Discernment's about looking deeper, isn't it? So you can't get through to the depth. You've got to start. You don't get to the deep without going through the shallow. So the shallow layers you've got to go through, and they reflect a reality. So you've got to go through that, and that's important, because that shallow thing at the surface is an expression of what's going on underneath in the depths. But if you just settle for the surface picture, you're going to be misled. It's like psychic mediums saying they've spoken. It's your Uncle Johnny's come through. And of course, this spirit, this familiar spirit, knew about Uncle Johnny and passes the information to you. So you go, oh, he's right, it's Uncle Johnny. No, you're getting information that you know is connected with Uncle Johnny, but that's not dead Uncle Johnny speaking from beyond the grave. I mean, you believe it if you want. It seems plausible, but it's a familiar spirit.
Yes, it is. And that spirit is familiar with your bloodline, and it's been here for eternity. So your bloodline, our bloodlines, Alex, go back to at the very least Noah. And Noah said, God, Lord, my grandsons are being tormented by these demons. And 9/10 were bound. And the 10th were let loose. Why? Because Satan said, you can't have them not being tested. These people need to be tested, and we have been tested. When we got to the cross, the authority that Satan had was bound, so he's been restricted ever since. we have, people are now debating whether we've entered Satan's little season or not. Some people are saying that it's all over and done with. Well, why is the death still? Because all this should be done and dusted. All enemies his footstool. You can't keep making this stuff up and then keep moving it down the line. That's why you can see what's been fulfilled and you can see what hasn't been fulfilled. And we've got to now try and join those scriptures to where we are in this reality where timelines have been changed, mate. We know timelines have been changed. I mean, if you can get rid of countries, and like I said, we've spoken about Tartaria before on the show, right? Now, that is in the region where Russia is. So Tartaria had all this stuff, all these buildings, all this technology, all this stuff that, who's Tartaria? How did we get to that? I remember in the 70s, I had a 1967 Tarzan annual somebody gave me, and it was talking about Tartaria in that. So I knew that Tartaria was somewhere in Tarzan land. It was only when I put that into encyclopedias where there was this area. Now we're being seen that it's not on any maps anymore, but it is on the old maps because I had books with the old maps that I got given to me from my auntie from university. Boring stuff, stuff that, oh God, I'm never going to read that. But I had to flick through it, and I wish I still had it because there's so much truth in the history that's now being changed. And everybody within the last 2 generations at least are swiping left to find out what that is. That means we don't have to burn books anymore. We can just let it go. Just let it fade into nothingness. But when we look at the Bills of Exchange Act, 1882, I mean, from 1882, people were setting bills off if you were creditors. Wow. All of a sudden, you should ask questions about yourself. At least that's what I had to do, Alex. As soon as I understood that I had to ask, wow, I've accepted stuff here. And I remember my mum saying, don't just accept what people say, question it. Well, okay, I'm going to go and question it. And I got people to tell me that you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're this, you're that. You don't, because mine goes up. All that stupidity, Alex, is now I see in front of me. And it's just something that we've got to it's landing in the fact that it's right. You can't see anything else because it's right in front of you. I shouldn't pay bills. If I don't pay bills and I do this, we lower the debt, national debt, we balance the books, the economy's balanced. That means there's more money, there's more credit, there's more things for people, what they paid into, like a trust fund. Wow, all of a sudden we see that the trust isn't the alien. None of this is the alien, and the system isn't. We talk about the registration of things. The registration of things was to keep things safe. I could walk up, people could walk up to somebody and say, hey, that's my son. Oh, no, it isn't. Oh, yes, it is. Oh, no, we get into this puppet show. Well, look, I've got the registration papers. Here's his fingerprint. Here's his footprint. That's how it's meant to be. So the property is people who create we back and reclaim that. The difference with the joint I was doing, Alex, was they'd recognise me as that live man because otherwise they wouldn't issue me with that instrument. It was simple. That's why if people had got on board with it back then, I think we changed stuff. That's why I now got this new confusion. You can or you can't. You know, I'm still very interested in some of the stuff that Rich is doing. I'm in touch with somebody who is in touch with it. I got into that fella. I've been told I could help him. He can't get by the court issue. Members agreed the debt's got to pay funds into that. The court don't present those. The court doesn't pay that. The debtor accepts it. It's different. As a taxpayer, you had money taken. So
You're cutting out really bad, man. Yeah. Oh, there he goes again. You still there, Alex?
Yeah. He might come back.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say that hopefully we get my personal hope what's going to happen soon is that the View gets shut down, that the View gets attacked next. Did you hear about Obama coming out and saying something stupid again this time about Charlie Kirk's death?
No, I heard about, was it Levitt or was it Tulsi Gabbard had said that he's going to be arrested?
Who, Obama?
Yeah.
I haven't heard that one, but it wouldn't surprise me. Hopefully that happens soon because that's something I've been waiting for. That's a big one. I mean, Obama was behind the Russia hoax of 2017, so he would be a good starter, either him or Hillary. So, at the end of the day, you gotta have one arrest. You gotta have one big arrest if you want to get to the others.
Yeah. So watch this space on that one. It's certainly heating up. So just as an aside, Taylor, we've not spoken about Putin for a while. So how do you see this whole situation? Because Russia's Ukraine's gone a little bit on the back burner, probably from an American perspective, but Europe keeps bringing it back up. They keep trying to frame Putin by having drone incursions into Europe so that NATO can get involved. How do you see this axis with Putin and the leverage that they're trying to get against Trump to try and get Trump on side against Putin? How do you see that?
Well, let me give a bit of backdrop on that first. Being that that whole thing in the Ukraine was that wrapped up within like a month or two after the event started. All Putin did, and what he always was intending to do there was just clean up the Donbass region and eastern Ukraine and fix that whole little scenario that was going on there. So everything since then has just been wag the dog, just like with Gaza. And there's plenty of footage that has come out that has allegedly come out of the Ukraine that proves that. But regardless, I will say that Putin, Xi Jinping of China, and Trump have all been on the same page since day one, working together to defeat the New World Order from all sides. And so the ironic thing is when people said that Trump was working with Putin back in 2017 with the Russia hoax, they actually were right, just not for the reasons that they said, obviously. But that's the ironic thing. Because they're working together to defeat the New World Order. But as far as trying to draw Trump into this whole thing, well, the thing is, you have to have the backdrop of understanding that if the Ukraine conflict, special operation wrapped up years ago, and that it's just all wag the dog, meaning that it's fake, then what are they trying to drag Trump into? Absolutely nothing, because this whole thing is just it's just a play. So this whole thing right now is trying to not only expose these European leaders, but also to weaken NATO. That's really what this Ukraine thing has been about. Weakening NATO and making sure that that it can never be used as a war power again, if not being completely dismantled. And when you have all these other countries that Trump is forcing to pay their quote-unquote NATO membership fee,
it's not only helping to revitalize the economy in the United States, it's also helping to show just how desperate these so-called European leaders are to force Trump's hand into getting against Putin. Because at the end of the day, NATO without the United States is nothing. It just doesn't exist, essentially, because the United States is the foundation of NATO. They're the heart and soul of it, and they wouldn't be trying so hard to push against Putin without the United States, knowing that the United States isn't on board. So at the end of the day, this whole thing, as I said, it's all wag the dog. It's all play acting, and like I said, it's all accomplishing the goal of weakening NATO.
What about if that's the case? Then NATO caused, or shall we say, helped provoke this war in Ukraine by inviting Ukraine to join NATO. You said NATO is nothing without America. So basically, America could have stopped this. You're saying that, you're saying Trump's come in and has put a stop to that because Biden was feeding it because America is NATO. Well, Putin in '99 said, all I'm saying is don't join NATO and we'll be happy. I won't wait for you to put nuclear arms on my border. I'll come and sort this out. So it's been a long time in coming, this. And what you're saying there is, well, America, there would be no war if America hadn't been part of this. And because of NATO being, including us, people don't realise that UK has actually virtually declared war on Russia. So we're all at war, and people are still going to McDonald's and Burger King, and Premiership's just been on this weekend. You see what I'm saying, Taylor? There's a lot that's going on that people can't see. This is really, you've got to hand it to him. This is subterfuge at a different level. This is beyond Matrix.
Well, the thing is that, as I said before, the UK with Keir Starmer and all them, they wouldn't be if this was all real. If this wasn't wag the dog, they wouldn't be stupid enough to essentially declare war on Russia without the backing of the United States. It just doesn't make any sense. I shouldn't even need to give examples of that. First of all, there's the Middle East, but that's a whole other discussion. It's pretty obvious. So at the end of the day, you're right that Putin said, was it 99 or whatever, just don't join NATO. Mm-hmm. And I find it funny to these lefties who attack Putin for doing what he did. When it's just like, let's take it back to the Cuban Missile Crisis. When
exactly, Taylor, you went to the right point. Kennedy or whoever did the thing that he needed to do. Putin is doing the thing that he needs to do. But then they all get together. Maybe it's not round a little campfire with a big 30-foot owl statue. Let's not go there. But they get all together and they talk about this stuff and they sort out about, it's almost like, right, you do that, mate, and then I'll go and do this. And if you do that, then that'll happen and we'll do this. It's this grand chessboard. And it's now trying to define who's actually moving these pieces, not the faces that we see, but who's moving them.
Well, yeah. At the end of the day, this is a worldwide military operation that has people like Putin, Xi, and Trump as the front men in order to lead things from the public realm, but also to get the people together, but also at the same time to be the commander in chief from behind the scenes as well, in order to fight back against the cabal, which up to this point has been in pretty much every country on Earth. At the end of the day, Putin saved Russia from being taken over by the New World Order when he came to power in 2000.
Yes. Do you know what? There was a lot of people who made good from all that. I mean, we over in the UK, we had Abramovich who bought Chelsea, that was subsequently known as Chelsea, because his billions from the breakup of Soviet Union funded all that. So everybody made loads from the collapse of the Soviet Union, but it was a planned thing because all these people have got alliances and agreements and treaties. You know, people don't understand just what a treaty actually means. We have been interlinked with all kinds of stuff under what they like to put an umbrella called joint enterprise. Whether you know it or not, you are contributing. And that's what we've got to admit to ourselves and be humble that we've been groomed into a society that is not just fallen, but it's sick, and it's getting sicker. I mean, I'm old enough to remember things from the 80s, even in America, when, you know, the American dream still existed. But then you find out about the CIA having all those drug operations that people tried to whistleblow on in the 80s, that got shot at, that got killed. All this stuff's nothing new, but they've got people exactly where they want them now, Taylor. They've gotten in a narrative where they think another man or another company or another system is going to come in and save us. And this is going to be a falseness. We're going to be presented with the possibility of peace and safety. And I think Alex might say that the Bible will tell us that once that's announced, whoever announces it, and Trump has been a really good candidate, because who's better than him? You know, he'll tell you, who's better than me at getting these things done? Putin wouldn't have done life. I'd have been in charge. Kim Jong-un wouldn't have done life. I'd have been in charge. I remember his dad. He went into a lair in the jungle and come out riding a unicorn. He got a hole-in-one on his first ever golfing episode. All these things are real in certain realms. You know, the North Koreans, they couldn't watch North Korea play in the World Cup that they were in unless North Korea won. So they were never live. This is all propaganda. To think that we are living in a free country, free world, when people have been taught to work hard and pay the bills as creditors in a debt-based economy. There's something really fundamentally wrong when people take moral high ground based on that falseness. That's what we've got to keep addressing, though. Anyway, thanks, guys. We've done over 2 hours. Thankfully, coming back on. I mean, I'm glad, Alex. I'm glad you were flying tonight, mate. Because, so angry. I was fighting with everything. Everything was just not working.
Yeah.
I've been cut off so many times. I haven't got a clue how much was heard and what wasn't heard. But do you know what? It got out of my system. It got, even now, ranting, getting this out, because the frustration I've got from messages that me and you have had over the last couple of weeks, Alex, over what's going on in the chat room. Everybody knows that there's something not right. There's something not right about this. And we've got to get ourselves into a position where, have we got all the information? Because people are now being pushed to go for these new, really brand new vaccines that are really, really going to work because we've got proof that it works. Experts say that. That's not really true, is it? We've been down this road before. I did have a video I was going to play, but it's about 10 minutes, so I'm gonna save it and hopefully remember to play it next week. But again, I'd like to shout out to Russ. He had some relations coming in earlier today, so he said he may not make it, but you know, God bless to Russ and his family. Thanks, Taylor, for, you know, persevering with what you've got to put up with over on that side of the States. It's not easy stuff for anybody anymore, is it, mate?
No, it's definitely not. I mean, but is it ever easy in our line of work?
No, not especially not living with commie parents, eh?
Exactly.
Commie parents that pays Wi-Fi. God damn it.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, thanks a lot, mate.
Yeah, no problem.
I'll send you a link through for next week. If you've got anything to share, just send it us on email, and I'll put it up on the pages. Okay, pal.
All right, appreciate it, man.
Nice,
Cheers,
brother.
Yep, cheers. God bless, guys.
See you guys.
God bless, mate. Alex, have you got anything to say in wrapping up, brother?
I'm just going to respond. I've liked everyone's comments in the chat. It's been a very good chat this evening. And maybe it's because I'm on my mobile. You've been like in and out. So I've had the screen on and I've not had to try and see myself on the video. So I've been able to follow the chat. So people have made good comments. And the last one that the wolf made, he's quoted the Quran here and said, "Your God is one God. There is no God save He, the Almighty, the Merciful." He says, "I like the sound of that." Now, I can't remember what it is in one of the Old Testament prophets that says, "There is no God save He." I think it's Isaiah. It might be Isaiah 43. It's either Isaiah 43:11 or Isaiah 41:13. Talks about that. But also in Isaiah 9 verse 6, basically God is described in Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, Wonderful Counselor. It fulfills all the triune roles, and God is described there as Emmanuel, so God with us. And that's the distinction between Islam and Judaism. And the idea that a puny human being by their own efforts could worship this incredibly holy, transcendent God, and they could somehow build a tower to heaven like at Babel to reach God by their own efforts. The whole point is that humans can't do that. That's why God had to come as Emmanuel, God with us from the inside, and redeem us from the inside out, because we couldn't do it ourselves. That's the problem with the monotheistic religions, whether it's, some people say Zoroastrianism is dualism, but it's typically somewhere between monotheism and dualism. But Islam and Judaism have got that vital part of the Lord your God is one God, but they can't make this step philosophically to God taking on human form. But unless God takes on human form, He is one God, and there is no God save He, the Almighty, who took on, from our perspective, human flesh as Emmanuel, God with us, and that was the only way. And that's the difference.
But the thing is, Jesus says that when we speak to our Muslim brothers and sisters, they say, well, why would God do that? God wouldn't do that. Do you know what? I can't say God wouldn't or couldn't as much as I can say, I think what God meant to say when He said that was this. It's completely saying that God can't do something. How dare you? How dare the creation say, you can't do that? One of my favourite lines from the KJV is, what makest thou? As if, asking the potter, what makest thou? Do as you're told. This is what I'm making you for. You've got your own free will within all that, but this thing about God can't do. Everything's possible with God. There is nothing in the Bible, in the scriptures, even though people will point at, look at the Crusades, look at the people that was killed in the name of God. That's completely against what the Bible says. So if you're saying the Crusades is Christianity, then I've got to say I'm not a Christian, because the Crusades were Catholicism, where they went and stole things, stole information, killed people, imported what we would look at as religion. And it's no different to what Islam did, which way they spread across the world by sword. pay your tax, pay your jizya, convert or die. Those were your options. So everything is it's right. It's in front of us right now. We've got to this pivotal point, haven't we?
Yeah, well, I think we have, and it's interesting what Wolf's saying here. So he's saying, why doesn't Jesus say this himself? Well, the thing is, Jesus disclosed a lot of what Jesus did. He said to the leper, "Do not go and spread this news, but go and offer the offering that Moses commanded as a witness to them." That's like in the tradition of the prophet Ezekiel, show, don't tell. In other words, Jesus has to be recognized, and you see that all the way through the Gospels. So, and that ties in with the point where Wolf says, Deuteronomy, God is not a man. Yeah, exactly. That's the point. If it was anyone else other than God as man making the claim that he was God, he'd be a lunatic or demon possessed. So, if God takes on human form, because he has to, that's the logic, that's the logos, then any other man who claims to be God is deranged. But if God says, I'm becoming man because it's the only way, then of course God is not any man other than Jesus Christ. Also, what we've got to ask about Islam is, why did they preserve the tradition of the Virgin Mary, right, being a virgin and being a child by the Holy Spirit? That would just be a stunt. Right? Well, why do that if he's just a man? Well, why go to all that length? Is that special?
Exactly, mate. Special? I mean, I'm looking at what the Wolves put here. It does not befit the majesty of God to enter his creation. That means we've got to throw Isaiah out of the window then, Alex.
Yeah.
You know, where he says that Emmanuel, God with us, God will enter creation, God will fix this, God will do that. Well, we'll just throw that out then.
Born of a virgin. And be born of Isaiah 7 talks about him being born of a virgin. So, I've had people arguing that it doesn't say in the Bible that Jesus, that basically Jesus was born of a virgin. There was nothing other than the gospel claim. Well, it's in Isaiah. Isaiah foreshadows it several centuries before Jesus. So the virgin birth's in there. Emmanuel, God with us, everlasting Father, mighty God, Prince of Peace, all these titles, different roles, but God with us. And that's the point I was making. I mean, look, Wolf is perfectly entitled to disagree. And, he isn't far from the message, because the message came out of the Jewish tradition. But the next step is, there was no solution, no remedy to the problem of the human heart. Whenever humans try and reach to God, they can't do it. That's what the Tower of Babel made very clear. All our righteousness is as filthy rags, like Isaiah 64 verse 6. We can't do it. Therefore, God has to do it as man.
Simple. Absolutely simple. And if there is no sinless blood sacrifice as a man, then we are all Satan's. That's why he thought he'd won. But that's where the mistake was made, because God came in and God picked up that death and said, nah, that's mine, mate. You don't get to say anything over that. And that's where he was bound. At the cross, Satan was restricted. He can't do what he can do before the cross. Everybody would be gone, Alex, if there wasn't that, if there wasn't this remnant that had limped and dragged itself all the way up to the cross through all that bloodline, from David through Mary, all that, Abraham, all that stuff. If none of that happened, and then the sinless blood human sacrifice, which was needed because the animal sacrifices only dragged them along, up to the point is click. It's done there.
Yeah.
I'm going to write my law in their hearts and in their minds, and even though they don't know that they'll be working for me, they'll be working for me. Now, what does that open up? That opens up all kinds of possibilities that can only be with God. But when we focus on this world, that is where we start to walk away from God. And if there are rules that we should adhere to so that we can stay with God, because in order to be alive, you need to be in God's spirit. And God said, my spirit will not be with man forever, because this has to come to an end. However, I'm going to spin it out for ages. You know, Noah had 120 years till everybody. They all laughed at him until it started raining. So we've got these images to be able to call on. It's just, is there any humility left in people who, I can cope with ignorance more than I can cope with people who believe something that they can't justify. You know, I believed in something. You always use a comment that, you know, my auntie'd be my uncle if she'd had balls. Well, that's the same thing. That's the same thing with this stuff. What do you know from your information? We invite people to come to this show every week. Why do you believe what you believe? Come and tell us. Nobody comes on. You know, I've sent the invitation out to several people. I've got a very special guest, Alex, that wants to come on. I'll talk to you about that. But we invite people to come on, and they don't. But they've got a lot to say. Well, come and speak before everybody. You know, it's beyond being secretive and pussyfooting about. We're in some dangerous times here. I know you said last week that we've got to try and keep a sense of humour, which is important. But it's not funny when people are being targeted. People are being put into categories. Do not resuscitate, putting on to end-of-life drugs. Just because of a certain age, they're denied fluids. And that's all policy if you go into a hospital. And that's if you're fortunate enough to not be in a corridor for 12 hours. You know, where did this happen, mate? We can see that life is falling apart. So I'm glad we've had these conversations tonight, even though we've had some horrendous tech issues to overcome tonight. But as always, mate, I appreciate your input, and thanks for wrapping up. Thank you, everybody, again in the chat room.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
God willing, a lot of prayer to get rid of these demons, but God willing, we'll see you all next week. Thanks once again, guys. Good night. God bless.
Night, guys.